All units, Snow Lake Napa unit. We have 2 major fires going in the unit.
We're going to evacuate all the way from Calistoga to Santa Rosa.
It was the most apocalyptic thing I'd ever seen. Never before in Sonoma County had we experienced a wind-driven fire that burned 11 miles in 5 hours.
One of our neighbors came banging on the door. The field next to our house was on fire. I'm going, okay, I'll just get the water hose or fire extinguisher and we'll take care of this. But it was already too late.
You could see the fire starting to come across the trees and everything.
The speed of the Tubbs fire was absolutely horrific. I would try to outflank the fire to get ahead of it into neighborhoods to try to evacuate people, but it seemed like within minutes, embers were falling and time's up and it's time to go.
I'm Irva Hertz-Pichotto. I'm the director of the UC Davis Environmental Health Sciences Center. And as I was watching the images of the wildfires in October of 2017, it just stunned me, and it dawned on me that our center could actually conduct some research and learn about these wildfires and contribute to understanding what the consequences of climate change are.
So in California, we have a perfect storm of conditions which is making fire more widespread and more intense. Those conditions are human suppression of fire for decades, which means that the trees are more dense than before. Climate change, which is making these ecosystems hotter and drier, which kills the trees, makes them more flammable. And finally, the nail in the coffin, the pine beetle in California, which can come in and kill the trees. And this is why we have about 130 million dead trees in California now, which makes them very vulnerable and susceptible to fire. Climate change is induced through greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, and that is causing ecosystems to become hotter and drier and more flammable. So climate change is contributing to the spread and the incidence of wildfire in many ecosystems on the planet. Now, this is concerning for a number of reasons. It affects human health. It's hard to breathe the air when it's very smoky. And we're seeing that happen in California and elsewhere. And then finally, it can give rise to what's called a positive feedback cycle. So this is a self-reinforcing effect in which climate dries out these ecosystems and kills the trees. Fire becomes more prevalent, which releases the carbon back to the atmosphere as CO2, and that CO2 further contributes to additional climate warming.
The changing climate is absolutely having an impact on how fires are burning, how they're spreading. California historically has experienced large, devastating fires. What's really changing is the intensity of the fires, the duration of the fires, and certainly the frequency. The Tubbs fire, when it reached Santa Rosa, literally crossed the 6-lane 101 freeway. This tells us that we have to be looking at threats that we didn't necessarily consider before.
I was the first battalion chief to arrive at the Tubbs fire. When I arrived, the fire was already very well established. We had no chance of putting it out.
I got a phone call from one of my friends. It was probably around 10 o'clock at night. And she said, you know, I think there's a fire and it's coming towards you and I'm worried. So we started packing up.
Once the power went out, that's when we left.
We ended up getting gridlock. I thought maybe there was a roadblock or something.
We turned back and I was just driving like a bat out of hell, and I was just thinking we gotta jump in the pool.
It was almost like a blowtorch. Everything was incinerated. Power poles were across the road. Wires were hanging. Oak trees were across the road. Cars were burned out. On the way down, I ran into 2 Santa Rosa police officers that were making their way up Mark West. And I remember stopping them, concerned for their safety, and asking them where they were going. It was then that I met Officer Chance and Officer Nick with the Santa Rosa Police Department. They told me that they were on the phone with 2 people that had survived the fire that needed to be rescued.
We got in the pool and we hugged each other a couple times and we said our goodbyes. I can remember holding Max, and he was panicking, trying to jump out, and I just had to yank him underneath. And I can remember a few times coming up for air, you know, barely able to get a breath of air. You know, you're just in survival mode.
A report of people trapped at 1404 Lorraine.